Today's show is sponsored by ExpressVPN, one-click protection for all your devices. Securing yourself could not be easier. Visit expressvpn.com/funhaus.
Hey everybody, welcome to Filmhaus for this week. Today we're doing a spoiler-heavy, that's a warning, discussion of all things this season of WandaVision from Disney+. James?
I was just going to say, some of it will be spoiler heavy, but others will be spoiler low density.
Okay.
Because that's a Vision reference.
That's how this is going to go.
If you want to take that intro again, you can do it, and I'll not say anything.
Hey everybody, welcome to this Filmhaus. We're talking about WandaVision. I've been looking forward to this because we're doing a deep dive on everything that happened in this season, and we're also looking forward to the implications of what we saw and what it means for the future of the MCU and some of the loose threads and questions that we still have remaining. And there's somebody that joined us today that I could not have thought of anyone better for this episode, or anyone that I wanted to talk to more about WandaVision, because she is not only just maybe one of the biggest comics experts that I know. She's also delightful. You've seen her on Geek and Sundry and The Nerdist. She also streams her vast comics knowledge in games. And former roommate of James Willems, 4 years. I don't know how she did it, but she did. It's Amy Dallen. Hey, Amy.
Hi! I'm so excited to be here. That was the best intro I will ever receive. Now I just have to live up to it. But I'm so thrilled to be here talking about the show, which turns out really fun. Very excited to not be talking about, boy, that first Disney Plus show really crashed and burned. So there's that relief, there's that joy, and then also it's just great to see y'all's faces.
It's great to see you too. And also I know that you were former DC Daily crew. Mm-hmm. And so I think that there's probably a whole audience that loved you on that is like, oh, now Amy's going to talk about Marvel stuff. Yeah. Like, it just feels dirty.
Finally.
You know?
They always knew, though. I even when I'm at my most partisan, I'm like, I love this. And also all comics. That's just kind of, you can't turn it off at a certain point.
Yeah.
Even the artsy-fartsy literary ones.
Even Vertigo.
Yeah. Heck yeah. R.I.P. Vertigo.
I think we have so much to unpack because we got 9 episodes of what I really have been calling experimental MCU. It sort of felt to me like it was breaking with all the formulaic things that we've sort of come to know about Marvel, and I really loved that about it. And so I wanted to ask you both, just coming out of the season, your general opinions on what you thought of it.
Go ahead, Amy. After you, I insist.
I will say, broadly speaking, I'm incredibly happy. I have loved those characters for a very long time. They stacked the rest of the cast with just all of my faves to a targeted extent. They were just like, what would Amy like? That's who we'll put in this show. So it was sort of unreasonably pleasant in that aspect. I loved, the execution was just so strong on so much of what they were going for with the themes. We'll get into all of the, there are things here and there that I might have done differently or was rooting for to go a different way, but just watching the entire world fall in love with Wanda and Vision, that's not something. Somehow we're over 10 years into this Marvel journey, and I'm still not over the I can't believe everyone cares about this stuff that we've always cared about. That isn't wearing off because they keep finding weirder things to reach for. And somehow delivering that. So a pretty joyful experience for me, even if I cried through the last 3 episodes.
I think we all did. James, I believe you probably felt exactly the same as Amy.
Honestly,
Ooh.
Hold on. No,
I don't like the way this is.
In a lot of ways, yes. And we're probably going to dig into it more. But if the goal of this show was to, number one, condition the Marvel cinematic audience into watching something on a weekly episodic basis, it absolutely succeeded in that. And if the other part of the show was to get me excited for the next phase of what's going to come down the Marvel pipeline, it definitely did that too. And it took 2 characters who, like Amy actually was kind of
Amy
alluding to,
on. Yeah.
completely background. When I watch Infinity War, that scene of them in the hotel room, I was like, let's just come on. Where's Corpus Glaive or whatever? Or Proxima Midnight. Well, that's if we can fast forward to when they show up, then I'll get
That was when I went to the bathroom.
Oh no, the kebab shop.
Yeah.
Like those, I get it. Those are moments for people who have that, but the cinematic universe didn't really sell their relationship to me in a meaningful way. But I'm all about them. Like, and I think if that was the primary objective of this show, which it probably should have been, it succeeded completely.
Yeah.
From there, I did have issues with some of the execution of the show and mostly, again, and this, it sucks because you can make 8 episodes of something great and then the 9th episode feels like maybe it missed the mark for you personally, and then you're like looking back on the rest of it and you're like, a little frustrated.
Sure.
So there's a little frustration there that we can dig into. But again, no, the show was hugely successful. Every single week I was tuning in. Like we actually stayed up past midnight a couple times, which we're old people, and that doesn't normally happen for us. So that way we could get our WandaVision fix. And when you think of the slate that they've been talking about, that huge line of movies that are to come, and WandaVision was on there, it's like, no, I don't care. But if this is the one that I wasn't going to care about, then I'm really excited for what they're going to do next.
Amy, the way you phrased it was that you said, I'm so glad that the world is falling in love with these characters we love. And I assume, did you mean that because you had like the prior comics knowledge to really enjoy them to the fullest?
And that made it easy. So for me, watching Infinity War, it was not like, for some people it was like, well, that was out of nowhere, and for me and some others we were like, finally Wanda and Vision, so it's kind of a different experience. But what you alluded to, James, they have to sell you inside the world that they're presenting. They can't rely on being like, I sure hope you already love these two as a couple. So I love that. I feel like you are far from alone. A lot of people who hadn't yet felt invested in those two really got on board because they showed them off in this series. But like, yes, I've always loved those characters in the comics. They have rough, horrible histories. It's comics, so just all kinds of shenanigans happen to people when you're around in comics for several decades. And Wanda and Vision are sort of two prize holders in that department, which meant, strapping in for this series, it was very much, in some ways, we knew what was coming. We were like, well, all right, whatever's about to happen, it's going to be devastating, and I can't wait. But at least what did you think?
I really, really loved the show. Infinitely more than I could have ever possibly imagined that I would like this kind of content. I think, like James, I was very much in the camp of these are maybe two of the characters in the MCU that I find the least relatable or interesting in following their stories. I not having the prior comics background, my only background was with the Vision family. And I'd never read anything with Scarlet Witch. So I felt also like these characters were shoehorned into a romantic relationship because I didn't know that they had this wealth of backstory in the comics. And to me, and I think for a lot of other people, this felt like a retconning origin story for more for Wanda, I would say.
Sure.
Like, I know that they did that on, actually on paper. They were like, okay, well, in in Age of Ultron or whatever, we established her as getting her powers from Hydra or whatever. I think it was Hydra, right?
It was a project that was part of or connected to Hydra. Yeah, it's all tied together. But yeah, not unconnected to Hydra, which is not a great background to come in with. But
yeah. But then in this they were like, okay, no, let's rethink that story and give some more depth to it and say, well, she wasn't a mutant, but which a lot of people I think were also thinking might come up. But because I know one of the things that I crossed my fingers for was a Magneto cameo, which didn't happen, but I guess we'll talk about that later. And though I did appreciate, oh no, she is the Scarlet Witch, innately magical. And then this, the testing activated her powers or what have you. And I think that gives her and her story and her connection, especially her connection to the Mind Stone and what that means for her relationship with Vision, so much more depth to me. Like I loved it very, very much.
I think it was so smart to make that retcon, I think, to deepen out her past, to let her be sort of more her own thing, to maybe open the door to those other revelations later. Maybe not, but now that door being cracked open, they have territory to play with. And it also, for comic book fans, it's it is the kind of retcon that hits us as like, yes, it is good and normal if Scarlet Witch is having her backstory rewritten, because that basically happens to her every other decade. It is almost a like, yeah, she's had several sets of parents over the years. Finding out, oh, never mind, actually this is what you and your powers are about. It becomes almost this meta commentary of like, she keeps changing the world around her, and also her own reality keeps getting changed by meta forces. And I know that's probably not how they came up with we're gonna do this sitcom rewriting premise, but it just accidentally works on so many levels.
Yeah. Sorry, James. I was just going to say to the sitcom writing premise, I actually felt that I don't know about either of you, but I never felt like Wanda was fun in the MCU. She was never a character that got to be fun, in my opinion. No, but then you put her in this sitcom format, which I know is, there's bigger themes at play, which is it's her coping mechanism and her way to preserve her little world and create her idyllic world. But it also felt to me like it was an opportunity to actually make Wanda a fun character with funny moments and goofs, and like let Elizabeth Olsen flex in that way beyond just she's this very like stern Eastern European character that sometimes waves her arms around and is sad. I thought that was great.
Well, I think like speaking of how much fun she was, right? There was an interesting thing that I noticed from the audience for the first 3 episodes. Because the first 3 episodes are basically just not even parodies. They are very genuine recreations of those types of sitcoms for the time in which they are set, right? Like, and I will say this, as someone who's always hoping MCU kind of breaks their mold and does something different and tries new things, I was like loving those 3, and because they were just genuinely good sitcoms. They were like genuinely good sitcoms. Like those would be the episodes. Oh, this is a classic episode of I Love Lucy, or Dick Van Dyke or whatever. Like they were just genuinely good, memorable episodes, well written and well performed. And I was a little like, I'm surprised that they thought that they would be able to get away with maybe 3.5 minutes of alluding to something greater outside of all of it. Like, and the audience reaction did seem to be kind of skewed in that way, right? Like, so I would go online and I'd see people that are like, I just don't get this show. Why is it just an old sitcom? And other people that were like, I love it. I was on the I love it side. But then there were other people that were like, why are they just making an old sitcom for 3 episodes? It's a show. I want Lost or whatever. So I'm just curious what you guys thought, because I was all about it. Like, I just wanted to see more and more of that show. And actually, in some ways, as it got further and further away from what those first 3 were, I was like, but I love those. Are so good, so genuinely good with the themes and everything.
You were like, dip
the
back in for 10 more of those, and then we'll move the story forward.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I could have just done the sitcom recreation show with Marvel characters, and sometimes there's a little bit of a wink and a nod. I don't know about you, Amy.
I was having a great time with that stuff, so I was not in any hurry to get to the other things. I do think they found, probably a good balance, because folks who were showing up for the Marvel Universe and for all of that stuff, I know, like, I could understand being like, would really love, we've understood that we're inside this reality and it's not yet clear how this is sort of pushing her character forward. And I didn't mind that it was a slow burn at all, but it did make sense. I don't know if y'all had a chance to hear, I guess Matt Shackman, the director, went on Kevin Smith's podcast. And one of the things that he mentioned is that they were running so close to running out of time for the season that, like, they were going to have to deliver the finale like 2 weeks before it went up or something. And I believe, if I understood this correctly, he said they had originally planned to drop the first 3 in a row.
Oh, okay.
Instead of just the first 2. And one of the interesting things about watching those first 2 is that we were like, wow, they really didn't break for those first 2. They left us for a whole week before they broke it. And it kind of makes sense that they had actually planned to take you up through Monica getting thrown out of the Hex on that first dump, which would have been, like, I feel like for the folks who felt a little lost at that structure, I think they had anticipated that feeling probably in planning it that way. But as it turns out, I didn't mind at all. I would have spent tons of time in that.
That makes so much sense, because I was watching those first episodes thinking this could get a little bit weirder than what it is for me, because I was sort of thinking of Legion and
Sure,
thinking like,
sure.
I did like how Legion was dark and weird. I'm glad that you mentioned Matt Shackman, because I was looking into his backstory, that he directed the season, and I didn't know that he was basically a sitcom child actor turned director. So he's sort of
just learned this.
yeah, and he's basically every sort of genre that he tackled in WandaVision, including like big budget action sequence, like he's done, because he directed like Game of Thrones episodes. He's done the grief. He did 6 Feet Under, so he's tackled like the heavy drama grief, and even
A ton of It's Always Sunny, apparently.
yeah, and even he was a child star in Oliver Bean, which was like a Malcolm in the Middle clone at the time. Like this guy, he and of course like he was on Growing Pains and stuff. So like he sort of ran the gamut of like all the genres that like I just thought that was such a cool choice of somebody to helmet, or at least direct it, because Jack Schaefer was the showrunner.
What's her name? Yeah.
Yeah. She's great too, because I was reading a bunch of interviews with her, and I think a lot of her, something that maybe people were disappointed about with the show was the show did have quite a few like red herrings. And there were things that I think people expected to be set up in the MCU. They expected this show, after starting it, to directly set up the multiverse, to directly introduce Mephisto. I feel like I say his name wrong. Mephisto as like a big baddie, of Thanos proportions. And it didn't do that. And her sort of stance on it is like, I was just invested in telling the story of these characters. I wasn't worried about setting up those things, because that will happen, and that's not what the purpose of this show is. And I really like that she took that approach to it.
Yeah, for sure. I think it definitely plays in this series, because again, theoretically there's no season 2, right? Like it's a standalone series, which means you can open and close things.
There might be. She was asked, and she said with I can't say anything, but with Marvel, don't say never, was kind of her response.
If I had a 7-figure,
come back next year.
Yeah, or a 7-8-figure paycheck on the line, I would also go, the door is always open as well. But like, there's a possibility, but it feels like, it came in with the intention of going, we got one shot at this. Obviously, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is more complex, because there were things in the show that they were like, this will get sorted out later, which is a luxury that you don't get on a BBC series where, like you have to open and close things. Like you don't get to just go, this will get sorted out by someone else further down the line. Let's kick this can. But yeah, it did such a really great job of selling the premise and stuff like that. I don't know if we want to get into it, but I did have some issues. We've been very glowing on it. So there are some things that did kind of bother me.
Because I think I know where you're going, and I think one of those things is kind of a red herring that the show did. Is it Pietro Quicksilver?
Well, no. I mean, I'll say this. When Evan Peters showed up, because we do this thing in our household where Elise reads every single spoiler and then tells me she knows everything about the show, and I'm like, well, don't tell me anything, because that's not how I want to watch it or enjoy it at all. So obviously there was news swirling about surprises that were going to happen in the season and stuff like that.
Sure.
And for me, the Evan Peters reveal was the most gasp-inducing moment in television since probably the Red Wedding in like Game of Thrones, where I was like, there's no way I could have seen this coming. This is such a twist. And not because I think that it is the best executed. That's another one of those things where in the last episode, I was hoping for more of a payoff of what it actually meant. And it wasn't. But knowing the business, it meant a whole lot for me. And Evan Peters is my Quicksilver. We all know that, okay?
He was the most fun.
He was, and nothing against Aaron Taylor Johnson, but he didn't really get a lot to play with in his, 15 minutes appearance in Age of Ultron as just a guy in a tracksuit, kind of. Evan Peters has always injected personality into the role of Quicksilver, and like him on American Horror Story, just as an actor, he chews up scenes, and he was the perfect addition to this, right? As opposed to the more stoic version of Quicksilver from the MCU. And also, again, what it implies about their intentions, right? Which is great.
So I think that this part makes me sad to talk about because I do think like the Evan Peters moment is probably one of the only major feels like a misstep for me in a show that I really loved. Not that he didn't do a great job, because he did a great job. It's just that, James, I also, that was one of the big gasp moments for me in all of TV. I try really hard to avoid spoilers, so I did not know that was coming.
I knew.
And while...
Of course.
I had read it 3 weeks prior because the dub actor had leaked
And I
it.
have to sleep next to this woman.
The evil's coming from inside the house. But it was a huge moment. And for me, like, a lot of the other things that people felt unsatisfied by from the show, I felt sort of like, the show never promised you that. So I can, I understand hoping it had gone that way, but I didn't feel the show promised you that. And Evan Peters is the one thing where I like a lot of what they've said about what they were going for, that recasting is a nod to sitcom history and the two Darrens on Bewitched and all that stuff, that accepting him corresponded to some of Wanda's bargaining phase, where she's like, I will take this close enough brother. And, that he brought a lot of the right sitcom energy to be the sort of screw-up uncle.
Wacky,
all
yeah.
of that is true. But choosing the other Quicksilver has tremendous meaning for us in the audience, and they know that. And so I spent the weeks after that reveal in sort of a mix of joy and terror as I tried to figure out what it meant for the Marvel Universe, because there are a lot of canon issues to be considered. Like, I love a lot of the Fox movies, but they aren't even consistent to themselves. So what does that cause when you try to import a version of them? What will it mean for the future? And the fact... I think it's the right decision to say that answering those questions is not the job of this show, which is about Wanda and Vision. But then in that case, I do feel like they maybe underestimated how much they were promising with that choice. And it sort of surprises me given how much care they take with things. And I will happily eat these words if in a couple of years, when they unveil the rest of their plan, it works perfectly. But that was one of the major things that I was like, okay, I'm not sure I love that in the end, even though you did a great job. And even though I was thrilled to see any Quicksilver again, because, sorry, not to put back on my comic book fan hat, I love the MCU, but it has always bugged me that we don't get to watch Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver be brother and sister, because I love sibling relationships in fiction, and they, in the comics, are one of my favorite dynamics. And while I understand intellectually that people have to die to give movies stakes, I will be mad about it every time, forever. And that was one that I was just like, oh, but we don't get. So it meant a lot to me to get that acknowledged and get that space in it. But yeah, that's the
Yeah.
I mean, I bet you were just slapping your knee when it all boiled to that boner joke.
Well, so I was gonna say, which is one of those things that kind of transpired in the last episode, where I was like, that was them walking it back, right? Like kind of what you're saying, Amy. It's like, we know the ramifications of this, but we're gonna diminish it in the last episode. But the solution that they came up with to diminish things didn't feel like it was worth it. Like it's like, wait a minute, he's an actor. But I'm like, except it's in a town full of people who are all playing parts that they are not actually. Like, none of them are those things. So what does him being an actor have to do with, like, it was such a weird he could have been just a regular kid, and she just looks around at like him winning soccer trophies or something like that and be like, oh God, he's just a pawn in all this. The fact that he had a headshot in there seemed like it was just to counter the movement that you're describing, Amy, that they put on the audience, right? Like, to really, oh no, Evan Peters isn't our Quicksilver. He's just an actor.
James,
he's as insignificant as Ralph Boner in all this, but we're glad to have him.
One of the theories that I saw floating around online that someone came up with was, maybe he's who Jimmy Woo was referring to when he said that he was there for someone in the witness protection program. Maybe Ralph Boner is in the witness protection program, which is not a theory that I personally like or give a lot of credence to. That was another kind of loose end or red herring that sort of popped up, was like that. And then, like, Monica's aerospace engineer friend who everyone was like, it's Reed Richards. This is how they're introducing Reed Richards. John Krasinski is going to pop out of that manhole next time, and he's going to wow us.
Excitement for that, and I get the fact that, like, look, the Marvel Universe does pull cool surprises on us on the regular, and that is why we look for cool surprises. I'm not a person who was disappointed that this was not an FF intro, because, again, the show had a lot of work to do, and also because I'm a Monica Rambeau stan, so I was perfectly happy with how that all went.
The show did some heavy lifting already, like opening up Wanda to be in Doctor Strange 2, introducing Monica, like setting up the idea even of magic in this capacity. Like it did a lot of heavy lifting, like you're saying.
Well, for sure. And I think we've also seen kind of what happens. It's in movies, but what happens when some of these Marvel films and properties try and only serve the needs of what's yet to come. Sure. Like you get Iron Man 2s. You get these transitional films which can be enjoyable, but ultimately you watch them and you're like, I don't know really what this did for Tony Stark in a lot of, like, this was more about like setting up the Avengers. They were just trying to get to that starting line as opposed to getting to their own finishing line. And so I'm really glad. And yeah, I think people are so not used to watching weekly television like this anymore. Like, and I'm glad that it was done this way, but I think it breeds this. I always think back to True Detective. Do you remember True Detective season 1? Like the spiraling theories for that show
the Yellow
were
Kings
insane. Insane. And it must have been wild for the showrunners and writers to watch that and go like, wait. They're pulling some production art that we just threw up on a child's bedroom wall and trying to draw conclusions about who the Yellow King is. Like, are you like, you have so really much time and energy to devote to this show.
I feel bad for the showrunner that almost as like a, precursor to the finale has to make a statement and say, I know people are going to be disappointed. Like people worked really hard and had passion for it. And it's really sad when you have to see that.
And also you compound that with quotes from the actors that are completely pulled out of context. Like someone basically sits Elizabeth Olsen down for an interview and says like, do you think you'll have a cameo that's bigger than The Mandalorian? And she's like, I don't know. And they're like, cameo bigger than they basically lead the question in so that way
I try to be adult about it, but in my heart of hearts I was really sad that Magneto never showed up because I was really hoping that he would.
I was genuinely surprised by the Evan Peters thing again. So I like the satisfaction of like, you got me with something halfway through this show. Because I think there were also a lot of people that when they got to episode 4 were like, oh shit, she's making this world. Whereas for me watching the show, I was like, well, if you've seen any trailer, if you know anything about this character, it's like, she's making this world. Like, I don't know what else you thought was happening.
It is interesting because the show is very much a weirdness and mystery show, but it's also a rare one in that sort of, in some sense, you kind of knew going in what was up, even though you didn't exactly know what or how or why. And that is partly like comic book side where sort of we're like, it's Tuesday, Wanda's creating a fake reality because she's sad. And it so in that sense, the ways that it unfolded over time were more of a mystery. And I know that there were some folks who were like, I would have liked more genuine, I have no idea how this could wrap up. I was pretty happy with the like, as soon as you figure out what's going on, whether that's right at the commercials or partway through, then you know eventually she's going to have to give it up. And just watching that tragic arc play out, I think, is very, very satisfying, especially with the supporting characters around her and like that. I surprisingly success. Okay, can I detour? Can I just
please,
off?
Please.
I'm so sorry, y'all. You
like Doctor Strange driving around a cliff. Just go for it, Amy.
I want to talk about the basic premise as it reflects on Wanda and sort of the various ideas of whether you did or didn't want somebody else to be involved and your basic reaction to the trauma plotline. Because I think overall, like, it was incredibly effective. One thing that surprised me is that up through basically the Agatha reveal, I was still hardcore hoping, and I know not everybody was with me on this, but I was hardcore hoping that there was someone else involved. Not because I thought that it needed like a Mephisto level villain to make it worth my time, and not because I didn't love the trauma and emotional storytelling they were doing, but because what was it? I think it was Charles Pulliam from IO9 who talked about Wanda's comic book history of being, quote, like a conveniently unstable plot device. And it was like, you know, House of M in the comics is a great story, but it's basically great for everybody else and not so great for Wanda. She's just kind of like been forced to break bad to make this story happen. And that kind of has happened to her a lot over time. And usually they try to sort of weave it in with something emotional. But one of the things that I loved about Alan Heinberg and Jim Chung's Avengers, Young Avengers, The Children's Crusade, is like an entire series kind of devoted to sort of rescuing her from like what had been sort of done to her on kind of a moral and character level for being sort of casually devastating to everybody else. So one of the reactions I had coming out of the finale is that, like, to my great surprise, they really got me on board with the Wanda's doing it herself when I hadn't expected it, because they just, the flashback episode was sort of the best version of this that I'd ever seen, and the first one that really made it about her, so that it's like, well, you know, I guess that's a valid story to tell. It doesn't have to just be plot devices to move other people forward. It can be a, like, you were real sad and you did a bad thing. But for me, if you lose control of your powers and you accidentally kidnap a town and somebody else has to get superpowers to come in and rescue you, that is a sympathetic supervillain story in their hero story. And they gave me that with Monica, which I love.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's the recipe for a Spider-Man villain. I was very sad and kind of didn't mean to do this, and now you got to rescue all these people. And it's there. I'm still revolving how I felt about it, but my initial reaction was, I was like, was she really? They let her off the hook in that last one to a surprising extent.
I was gonna ask, like, how did you feel about, you know, the Wanda walk of shame and then Monica saying, "They'll never know what you sacrificed"? Because I was like, well.
Yeah, excuse me? You got
You kind of tortured this whole town.
Like, I peed my pants 5 times a day while mowing the lawn.
So that was, look, it's tough to sort of be like, I imagine that maybe if things had been different, I wonder if those are some scenes that, like, they ran out of time for a little bit, where, like, really letting it sink in, because there should have been a little more time for Wanda to sort of recognize, oh my God, I did to you what I am having to do to myself. I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. Like, and that's a real human story. I didn't mean to, and I'm sorry. But they didn't have a ton of time for that, nor did they have time for a mixed reaction from the townsfolk to be sort of like, we're mad, but like none of them get to be like, and what about your kids? And be like, oh, those sweet kids that we met? Oh my, because you could understand a variety of reactions from them. Some of them, like, you know, it's true that you can't make them forgive you because that's not how that works. But like she does eventually deliver an apology. She gives it to Monica. Now, Monica's kind of been sort of the moral center and the one rooting for Wanda to be her best self, which is, again, like, I eat that up. That's my favorite hero thing. It's like, I believe in you. I believe you're better than this. Like, I'll watch that story forever and ever, over and over again. And so in that sense, Monica seeing the best in her, I loved. But it was sort of a, like, we didn't have time for the making amends scene, so you're just going to tell Monica you're sorry and then leave. I don't know. Yeah. What did y'all think?
I mean, I could, everything you just said is like completely.
Yeah, it's
like,
more eloquent than any way I could have summarized.
With much more context than I could ever possibly apply. I think that's 100% whatever I was feeling during the last episode that I probably couldn't have articulated as well as you just did. Like, it did seem like some of it, I'm sure, is to serve a greater good. You may see, because if this were just a show, I'm sure they would be like 10 episodes and we're going to deal with that. Because they knew how. Like, the show is smart.
It's so smart.
The worst, when you're watching something and you're like, I think this is dumb. Like, that's what really sucks. I never felt that way watching this show. It felt, they were like, no, it's a way smarter show than me. I loved watching it and eating it up. But it did feel like it is part of something that's bigger than this. And so it was 100% not just a show to serve something else, but I do think that there's a world where you're watching the ending and especially the second end credits sting, and you're like, she's probably going to have to tackle this later on.
Yeah. And actually, this is a great
You know?
point. This is a great starting point because I want to talk about what's next. And I think this leads directly into that because I have a question for you guys. So we're going to talk about going forward now, what this looks like, how we can incorporate what we've taken from WandaVision into the MCU. But first, a word from our sponsors. The curators at Bespoke Post have made this winter all the more stylish and comfortable with an all-new lineup of essential Box of Awesome collections guaranteed to upgrade your life. Whether it's to showcase pieces to level up your indoor hosting skills or cozy threads for those blustery days, Bespoke Post only sends the best stuff every month. No matter what you're into, Box of Awesome has you covered. From style and grooming goods to barware, cook tools, and outdoor gear, Box of Awesome has collections for every part of your life. They have really, really great getaway bags, which I know we're not really traveling much right now, but when we do, you'll have your Box of Awesome bag to do it with. They have great kitchenware and really stylish decanters and glasses and stuff like that. Things that you wouldn't normally find on like your regular department store shelf. Cool curated stuff. To get started, you can take the quiz at boxofawesome.com and your answers will help them pick the right Box of Awesome for you. They release new boxes every month across a ton of different categories and it's free to sign up. You can cancel a month or postpone anytime. Each box costs only $45 but has $70 worth of gear in it, so it's a great deal. And right now you can get 20% off your first monthly box when you sign up at boxofawesome.com and enter the code Filmhaus at checkout. That's boxofawesome.com, code Filmhaus, Filmhaus, for 20% off your first box. Thank you, Box of Awesome. Voodoo Ranger is the beer that doesn't take itself too seriously, and neither should you. It's the beer that you pick based on the can design alone that doesn't disappoint, and I can tell you that's something that I, a very novice beer drinker, do when I go to the store is I look at the novelty designs and like goofy gimmicks and stuff, and that's what I go for. But in this case, Voodoo Ranger is the actual beer that has a fun design and delivers when it comes to taste. I like Captain Dynamite. It's more of a hazy IPA, but you have tropical notes and flavors, which I really like. So if you have never tried Voodoo Ranger, I welcome you. Visit at Voodoo Ranger on Instagram and Twitter to hear more. And don't forget to live rangerously, which is a slogan that I really, really love. So thank you, Voodoo Ranger. And yeah, live rangerously. Amy, you touched on it there. I think that we didn't really see Wanda necessarily be redeemed. I think that I couldn't tell if the show failed at redeeming her, or maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe Wanda is now in this morally ambiguous gray zone. She's, we saw her in the end credits scene reading the Darkhold, and sure. We're setting her up to be in Doctor Strange 2, the Multiverse of Madness. Like, it's already confirmed she's going to be in that. So maybe Wanda is not going to be a purely up white, knighting superhero. That we know the synopsis of Doctor Strange is that he'll be researching the Time Stone and facing off against an old friend turned enemy and unspeakable evil. And a lot of people are assuming that this would be, I'm going to butcher his name, Chiwetel Ejiofor.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Amy. This is why you're like a voice actress and singer, and I'm like, but like facing that, he'd be facing off against Mordo, who is his friend, and they kind of set that up at the end of the first Doctor Strange. But then I think that there's potential that he's gonna maybe try to, find ground with Wanda too.
Well, but I mean, you were talking about it right there too, with what is Wanda gonna be in this series going forward. And then building off what Amy just said, it's like, okay, well, she didn't walk away from this going like, my powers can hurt people. Like, that's generally the reaction in a lot of ways, especially with villains or with heroes or whatever. It's like, I didn't mean to do that. I'm remorseful, and these powers can't hurt people. But then in the finals, the end credits tag, it's her. She's like, how can I get more powerful? It's like kind of where it leaves off. She's like, no, I'm just gonna drink a coffee, have like an eat, pray, love out in the woods, and really learn how to get super strong. And that's a different take, right? Like, that's definitely doesn't seem like she's having her dark night of the soul.
Yeah,
but I wouldn't be thrilled with the direction of like, and the moral of the story is that the powerful lady just shouldn't have so much power.
Oh, for sure.
And that, again, I'm referring more to sort of some of the antecedents? What am I trying to say? I think that's the opposite of what I mean. The things that came before in the comics tended to fall a little more into that, I think, than what they've done, which is much more sort of thoughtful and responsible in the MCU. And she's obviously been walking down this path of like accidentally causing harm in Civil War, and being a reformed villain is the actual comic book origin of the Scarlet Witch. So in that sense, it's kind of classic. But like, I am curious how they will walk the line of being like, will she be a full-on villain in Doctor Strange? What did or didn't she learn? I don't think I will personally be thrilled if she's a villain, but also I guess
same.
I understand that conflict needs to exist for stories.
Yeah. If it was me and someone said to me, like, this text says that your power exceeds that of the Sorcerer Supreme and you're destined to destroy the world, I'd be like, let me read that again for a second.
Yeah,
like, what did that say?
Are there footnotes?
Yeah.
and I think we've seen the spool back up happen a lot in the MCU in general. Like, I mean, my personal favorite MCU film is Thor Ragnarok. and I love watching it, but it is hard to watch because it's immediately followed by Infinity War narratively, where it's like, we've saved the people and I've learned how to be your leader. The next time you see them, that ship has been eviscerated and like most of them are dead. And it's like not even dead in a snapped kind of way. Dead in like a brutalized, not coming back, they're dead kind of way. And I'm like, oh gosh. Like, so, and again, thinking about the industry side of things, they were like, Taika, wherever you want to end it is fine. Not knowing that someone was going to come in afterwards with a bulldozer and just like smash it down. So I hope
dangers of interconnected storytelling.
I hope that WandaVision doesn't. I don't think it will. Too much effort was put into this show. Too much I think they probably hopefully see a future, especially with how successful this show was. Like in this kind of medium, that I don't think that they would do that. This is not like an Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. where it's like you guys get your own corner to play in, and you get to do as much as you want to with that corner. So I think there will be ramifications. I don't think that they're going to steamroll it, but like it is always a quiet fear of mine is like, they're like, well, it's for the greater good. We got Mephisto to fight, like, how it is. So I don't know that I don't know how I feel about that, but yeah.
I would love to see sort of a series of parody comics about the characters finding out what they're going to do in the next movie and being like, like Hawkeye's just like, I killed how many people? Okay.
Yeah. I do what with my hair?
Yeah, what? Because why again? Linda Cardellini disappeared. Oh, all right, sure.
Well, she is rad. So on some level, I get it.
Yeah, I love her.
Yeah. But yeah, it's definitely setting up stuff. I mean, I was already super excited. I wasn't a huge fan of the first Doctor Strange film.
Same.
And I thought visually it was like fantastic, casting wise, great. But like I wasn't like, it didn't sell me on Doctor Strange. I didn't really buy in on him until the Infinity War films, and like he just kind of got to be more of a major player. But it seems like the multiverse of madness is like, they're like, no, who cares? We're just going to dive deep into this character. We don't have to intro. And I think that's a lot of cases. So you saw that with like Ant-Man versus Ant-Man and the Wasp. Sure. We got to intro this character so that way the people in Ohio really like this person, and then afterwards, once they're bought in, we can kind of do whatever we want to. I mean, Thor has 2 pretty mediocre films followed by my favorite in the whole series.
Them, they're better than you remember.
Dark World is better.
Well, better than you remember it being. I mean,
here's my favorite story about Dark World is Elise and I watched it, and we watched it on a digital platform, and we got 50 minutes into that movie before we realized there were supposed to be subtitles turned on for the Dark Elves. For those scenes, but we didn't notice. We just
thought there was supposed to be a bunch we were supposed to infer.
I feel like we probably should have known what was going on there.
Like really
but it could have
surprising visual storytelling for this piece. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something that this show leaves as a loose end, and I think rightfully so, because this is the story of Red Vision and not White Vision. But it White Vision after Red Vision, as I'll call him, or I guess maybe like Vanilla Vision.
I like Vanilla Vision. That's good.
After
Wait, no, but is Vanilla Vision the one that's colored white or the one that's we think of as the original.
Oh no, it's even more confusing.
Which one's Theseus?
Which is that is the question. Which I love that they incorporated that. It feels maybe a little bit like cliche and cheesy, but I loved it.
That's great.
I can watch an infinite number of robot logic loop fights. I love them. Like
same. Elaborate. I really liked that they resolved it the way they did, and with giving White Vision those opening those memories, but then he took off into the sky unbeknownst to where he's going. And I was just kind of like reading different theories about it, and sort of the big one that I saw a lot of people pointing to is that we're going to see White Vision show up in Black Panther 2. That like he's headed to Wakanda for answers, because that's where Vision was made, and also Shuri there like is someone that he knows can like maybe not rebuild him, but maybe unlock more or open
acting
up
wise. I would
his
watch
potential.
those two just bounce off each other. That would actually be super fun, but it hadn't occurred to me at all.
Yeah. I think the interesting thing about that scene, and again, if you don't mind, I just want to touch on some of the things I didn't like about the last episode.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Which was, that scene was really fun. And it was really great. Robot Loop is fantastic. It was weird that it felt like he was like, no, like you are a husk, and so I'm going to make you whole again by giving you the things that I know. I mean, the things that he knew were
giving or
so
unlocking.
Unlocking, whatever. I mean, I guess it's the soul. Who knows how to describe it? Because like it isn't him, but it is him. He doesn't have the stone, but he does have the stone. What is Vision is. I mean,
But I love
they
that.
tackle it great. I love it too.
The line
weird.
of like I was a voice, and then I was is it? I was a voice. I was
a voice without
and
a
then
body.
I was given a
voice
a robot
a body.
Who didn't know how to be human, but he just said it differently, and
and now a memory. Like then, I love that.
But when he's actually dealing with Vanilla Vision, he like touches him, and there's a moment where like his eyes come into view, and he becomes whole, and he goes, "I am Vision," and you're like, oh, now he's got everything, and his choice is to just blast off. Like he didn't go and help Wanda, like, and you would think that would have been a bigger part of what he ended up being, considering it was such a big part of the Wanda manifested Vision, right? Like, so it was a really strange reaction, and it felt like a lot of what that episode 9 was, which is like, we got to end it. We got to wrap things up. Like, he can't get involved at this point because it's still...
To me, that's if White Vision had gone in and been like, Wanda, it's me, baby. To me, it would have undermined reconciling that story of Vanilla Vision.
Anything up.
Yeah, about giving anything up, and about her and Vanilla Vision having to have that goodbye. And that's the story.
Which one's Vanilla Vision? I am still confused.
The red one.
The red one should be Vision Classic, and White Vision will be Vanilla Vision. Where I'm going to taking your term, and we've inverted it. I'm very sorry, but I love it very much. So.
Vanilla
Vision.
Great.
But I you're 100% right. But I think it's one of those threads where it's like, They had to get to the point where they needed to, where Wanda could say goodbye to Vision and realize she's given everything up. But they're knowing me, the audience knows that there's a Vision out there who chose not to go back to her is a weird thing. And then the greater thing is that it would have interrupted the beam fight that two CG characters were having in the sky, which is like This is my biggest issue with the whole show, and it didn't ruin anything for me. But it's an MCU problem. It's systemic in the MCU, is that anytime they're thinking of a villain, they go, what about a palette swap of the hero? And I get it. You have a hero, and you can have the antithesis of that hero. Thusly, a great villain is someone that represents the opposing force of the hero and what the hero needs to find in themselves. I get all those things. It's perfect. But we are at like, out of what, 20 something movies? How many are there? We are at the point now where I would say 60% of them are palette swaps of the hero made in a computer.
So my argument, because I get where you're coming from, and I'm with you in that camp so much, but I think that the fact that there are multiple visions, multiple iterations, and leaning into the voice, the body, the memory. They're doing such an interesting job of setting up Vision as identity and exploring what the identity of Vision means that I totally give it a pass this time.
Yeah, no, but I'm talking about more than just Vision in this case. I'm talking about
I know
Wanda
you are.
and Agnes.
Well, Wanda and
right?
Agatha, yeah, they're palette
'cause
swap too.
Agnes, under any other performer, would have been probably a wet fart villain at the end of this. If it wasn't Catherine Hahn, just destroying it. Every scene leading up to and after the reveal just completely destroys it. And that's another thing MCU does, is that they will take someone like Killmonger, who at the end of Black Panther becomes just a straight up palette swap. That fight scene, I really like that movie, but that fight scene at the end is really hard to figure out what the fuck is going on because they look identical. There's like one slightly gold. It only has resonance because Michael B. Jordan is so fantastic in that movie leading up to it, right? And so they're very lucky.
In that sense, like, Black Panther is one of the best examples of why you use that model, because it really is about who you'll be and the choices you're making. And, like, it I think, needed to be here's the option I'm not choosing and how that will inform me being king, like against his dad, against Killmonger, looking at all of the women in his life and learning different things from them. Like, so I would basically, I think that was absolutely the right choice for Black Panther. It's part of why I enjoy, like, I really liked Doctor Strange. And one of the reasons I liked it was, like, the final confrontation. By that time, I'd heard a lot of people being like, oh, it's always the same, it's always the same. And, like, this specific final kind of boss fight at the end of Doctor Strange is very much out of that model. Like, who he's confronting and how he solves that problem are very like, oh, this is a Doctor Strange situation. It's not going to look exactly the same. Even though, like, he was a good sorcerer fighting up against a bad sorcerer for a lot of the movie. So I just got distracted defending Black Panther.
No, I mean, go ahead.
And Doctor Strange.
But I get what you're saying about wanting to see different variety, and I would have loved to see more about, like, Agatha Harkness is traditionally a good guy in the comics, and who knows, maybe she contains. She's got, like, weird energy. She always seems like she might be kind of a bad guy at any moment, like in a cool witchy old lady way. But she becomes sort of like, she starts out. This is part of why everybody got obsessed with the FF possibilities. She was originally the nanny for the FF baby.
Oh.
Like, because, when you need a nanny, you get, like, a cool old witch lady. You're the Fantastic Four. That's how you roll.
I'm a Nanny McPhee type.
Yeah, and she ends up becoming a kind of a mentor to Scarlet Witch on and off in different ways. Like, I didn't mind them having her as the bad guy because she has always seemed like someone who might decide that today that's the thing that's going to happen. But you are right that I think her backstory was sort of thinly sketched in comparison to some of the deep and sophisticated writing they had for the other characters.
And in a lot of cases, it's a design and execution issue. The Black Panther thing is, I think Killmonger's design is better before he gets a suit at the end of that movie, right? Like, I think he stands out differently. It's thrown together, it's pieced together. It's not clean. It's, like, messy, and it still calls back to the African cultural side of it, but in a very different way. And I actually, like, when that movie switches over and then he's like, I have now a Black Panther suit now. I'm like, it's the same with, like, fighting Whiplash in Iron Man 2. It's at night and it's just robots, like, just
this is what keeps James up at night.
Other.
I know it.
And so like the Agatha reveal, she's amazing, but in the end it is one slightly red thing and one slightly purple thing floating around in the sky, throwing their respective color beams at each other. And I was like, and its vision is the same. Like, there's literally a point where they're circling in the sky and they're shooting beams at each other. And I'm like, I really wish a show that is so introspective. I would have loved to see a Doctor Strange, more like a Doctor Strange finish to it,
like a mind
in
battle.
A lot of ways. I don't know.
Yeah, any criticisms
like that,
of palette swaps aside, I think we can safely confirm that Agatha, as now imprisoned in the persona of Agnes, will be back, and it will be them teaming up. Like, she has to call on her. I don't know. I think the question is just where and when. Like, do we think Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness?
Are we gonna see her again?
I'm really curious because I wonder about their planning where obviously, they're going to hope that you buy Disney Plus and watch WandaVision before you watch Doctor Strange. But they probably have to also design that movie such that people who didn't won't leave it being like, what was all that? So I wonder, like, how much can you import from what happened in WandaVision? Like, you can have Wanda show up and be like, my kids are out there, need to find them. That's pretty easy to explain, as much as the rest of it is very complicated. I don't know if you can also pull Agatha in without losing, like, the Doctor Strange of it all. Although I would love to see her again, and so therefore will absolutely support any choice they make that shoehorns her into future stories.
For sure. And she did a really fun, like, camp performance job in WandaVision. But by all accounts, what I've been hearing about Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness is it's going to be darker. It's going to have horror scenes, I was the way I read it, because Sam Raimi got, you know, director swapped, and he's on now. Danny Elfman is scoring it. Like, it has all these macabre tinges to it. And that, as someone that wasn't super jazzed about the first one, that makes me so excited for this one.
But again, it's Sam Raimi, right?
Sam Raimi,
and,
so
like,
it could be camp.
He's the king of cheese.
He will
sometimes make an amazing movie and then try and ruin it himself by cheesing it up in a lot of ways, you know. So like, I think it's a perfect fit.
Let's not forget that dude, like, would we have the superhero golden age without his Spider-Man movies? It would look pretty different. And so he, on that level, like, we know he gets it. We don't know that every single thing is going to go how we want it to go, but it's very interesting to be like, please come back to superheroes, but add that other side of what the stuff you love to do is. So I'm pretty hopeful for that combo, but who knows? Movies are complicated.
I'm very excited. Like, honestly, since Taika Waititi signed on to do a Thor, like I'm super, when they
Not
said
Kenneth
Sam
Branagh?
Raimi's going to take this over. I was Branagh, yeah. I mean, he did amazing. I honestly thought the first Thor was very beautiful. It's like a Shakespearean epic, which is definitely in his wheelhouse. But like Sam Raimi taking on multiverse,
it couldn't start out just being a joke. I would have even in the first Thor, there's a ton of fish out of water comedy. They bring a lot to it. They don't make you live in the epic all the time. But like, if you can't invest in the majesty of Odin, throw your whole Thor trilogy away. What are we doing? Like, even if you're gonna undercut it meaningfully with colonialism in movie 3, like, that only works because he had dignity in the first place. Anyway, sorry, Thor defense aside.
Sam Raimi, perfect. I think it's perfect.
No, I love that you have the passion and the background and the knowledge, Amy, to make me excited for these things that I basically wrote off as like, I'm never going to watch those again. But now I'm like, maybe I need to revisit that.
Well, plus spend some more time with Darcy. That's just going to be fun, right?
Yeah. I am looking forward to, because we're probably going to see Darcy next in Thor Love and Thunder. I imagine she'll be back.
I don't know.
We'll see her pop up.
I would hope based on this that they'll find a way, but I hadn't heard that the plan was that. Do y'all know anything on that front?
No, I don't think they've revealed too much information about that movie. Something else I wanted to get your opinion on, Amy. We kind of got derailed on the Vision talk, but do you think Wonder Man? You think White Vision might be, or we'll see even the voice to body to memory get siphoned off even more?
I am curious because in some ways, okay, so for people who might not be familiar, the original Vision was created out of the parts of a World War II android and the human brain patterns of a sometimes Avenger named Wonder Man, Simon Williams, who is hilariously an actor. But it's interesting. They've now given essentially Vanilla Vision, as we've stolen the name and are using it, has just gotten his memories unlocked by Classic Vision, who's actually Memory Vision. So I don't know. My scheme is falling apart now. He's gotten his memories unlocked by that. But in that way, he now closely resembles that original sort of like, I am made out of somebody else's memories and emotions and my own robot parts. And I have to figure out what that means for me as a semi-person. So they don't need a Simon Williams to make that story work. But obviously, I'll be thrilled if he shows up because he's hilarious.
Well, I wonder even if like maybe they just deviate from that like he becomes Wonder Man, but not from the origins of Simon Williams. And so it's like, oh, he goes to Wakanda and gets souped up, and now he's not just Vanilla Vision, he's Wonder Man or something like that. Like
on the name himself.
Yeah. Maybe I'm just far reaching because I don't have this wealth of knowledge, and I'm just like a weird like outsider.
No, but that's awesome. They need new ideas. They can't just keep sticking with those of us being like, well, here's how it went in issue 268. Like, you gotta actually have new ideas as well, and I dig it.
And I'm also excited. I think, Monica Rambeau, she's going to meet Nick Fury, right? That's where she's going to be in Captain Marvel too, right?
I think she might be going to meet Talos, the Ben Mendelsohn character.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like it's one of those two.
But I guess she would have gotten a page.
But they established that Nick Fury like hangs out in space with them now.
Yeah.
Like that's like a weird established thing,
which
right?
I love.
So, yeah. Here's before we get any more scrolls, we got to figure out how to get the prosthetics to fit in their mouth so it doesn't cause them to not be able to speak.
Oh no! I had not noticed this. I'm not always as attentive to some of these things, but I will heartily co-sign if it's getting in the way of them doing their jobs.
I'm a Mendel head. Okay, I love him and everything.
Son of
he's
Mendel.
in. He's one of my one of my faves. I love him being integrated into the MCU, but it drove me crazy that whatever prosthetics he was wearing, he couldn't speak. And I'm like, we're at the point now where we can figure. I watched Lord of the Rings, and these orcs are reciting Shakespeare, no problems whatsoever, and yet. Yeah, I don't know.
No,
that
makes sense.
That's my only criticism.
I feel like Captain Marvel was really I must have seen him in stuff, but I feel like it was substantially my introduction. So I fell hard for. I was like, this guy's great. I could watch this friendly scroll all day long. He's super fun. So I've already. I mean, for obvious reasons of loving Carol Danvers, I've been long very excited for this movie, and everything that they add to it makes me more excited. Like loving Monica. Like, I honestly, if I could live in a world where I hadn't known that Tiana Paris was actually playing Monica Rambeau, the grown-up version of Little Monica, like if that had just landed on me as a total surprise, we wouldn't be having this conversation because I would have dropped dead. Like, because I'm segueing into supporting cast now, but like that, I really loved like her flashback episode about going through the blip, connecting the dots to Captain Marvel, leading up, like, the arc that sort of begins with getting ejected, like, delivering those babies, getting ejected, fighting your way back in, getting superpowers to do it, and then, like, the sequence of going through the barrier and hearing the lines from Captain Marvel. That was my, like, joyful weeping. It was, like, keeping the promise that they made in that first movie where you're like, this is really cute, but will they ever really deliver on baby Monica? Or am I just going to have to live the rest of my life being like, well, that would have been cool, but you never had a chance to follow up. That was like another of the things overall taking from this show. Well, I would have loved for her to have more to do in the end and some time to react to having powers, and I'm greedy. I want everything.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if if it gives the MCU points or takes them away, that the new properties have to better inform the old ones and make them better. Like, I don't know if that's an achievement or a drawback. Like, I really can't tell.
Really good point.
I think we're in uncharted territory, right? Like at some point, once the volcano erupts and covers our society in ash, freezing us in compromising positions, and then some other society comes back and then finds the things we've been consuming. Number one, no, there'll be missing pieces. So something like WandaVision will just have gone missing, and then it'll just have to be implied by historians of the time that there's a missing piece, and we're aware of a missing piece, so we can only assume what's in there. But I do think that it will be like a whole different kind of storytelling that they'll have to wrap their heads around when they're breaking into the MCU.
I wish
that
we
was
could
a long metaphor.
Talk about this all day, but I think we do have to wrap up. Do both of you have any closing thoughts, statements, what you're looking forward to?
I had a blast. It made me love watching week to week television again with this show. I think it made me excited for what's next to come. I do think that we're always going to be running into issues of when something is just a piece of a bigger, more important, larger goal. And I think some of those issues showed up in this show, but they weren't enough to ruin it for me or even spoil it in any way. I ate it all up, and it made me like the characters that are involved way more. So
that's so cool. I just a promise to your audience, I don't love everything. I just have a lot more fun talking about what I like. And I like most things, to be fair. I Thank you so much for having me on to talk about this. This was a blast, and obviously I could talk about it for 17 more hours, apparently.
I want you to come back if you will. Because I feel like we can talk about more.
I will say, in terms of what I'm looking forward to, I don't know when or how they are going to keep that promise they made to the audience right at the end, where she hears what I think was the voices of the kids out there. And this, if you absolutely want to have no idea what's coming in the MCU, even as a guest, stop listening now. But like comic book heads, we were just dying week by week throughout the series, in part because we've seen those kids before. They were summoned into existence in the comics. They got brutally wiped out of existence in the comics. And again, Alan Heinberg and Jim Chung came along and were like, we are going to take delicious continuity and make a stew, and we're going to call it Young Avengers. It's one of my favorite series of all time. There are a few different runs of them. They are literally all good, which is great and rare. And we already know we're going to see some of the characters they brought in for that. But if you would like to know why anyone would be that excited about those kids' Halloween costumes, please read Young Avengers. I don't know how they're going to make good on this, but they gotta eventually, because that promise they definitely made to us as an audience. So I will be holding them to it, and I'm very excited.
I'm probably gonna like get the first Young Avengers now, which I never thought I would say 90 minutes ago.
Hate it, I'm very sorry, but I really hope you dig it. It's from like 2005-ish, and it was at the time it was like some new team of kids, and I read some new team of kids book. Like I love that stuff. We had no idea that it would be like, and someday this will sow so many important seeds for a major movie franchise. Just the last thing on anyone's mind at that point in time, which hopefully will make it even more delightful.
I love that. For me, like it's been said to death that this was a great exploration of grief. I love that. And something I didn't really think about going into WandaVision was, in Endgame, Thor got his closure going back to see his mother. Iron Man and Pepper Potts said their goodbye. Captain got to rewrite his history and go back to the woman that he loved. And like Wanda was left just desperately isolated on an island in her grief. And I never really thought that I would want or need this story, but it was so wonderful. And God bless the multiverse, because Alfred Molina, we're coming for you. We're coming for you, Molina. And I couldn't be more excited. It's just, I do think that we're in the era of anything goes. I love that these movies can now take chances on not necessarily assuming that the audience needs to have watched the previous 20 movies, because there's no way. So like, why the fuck not? Let's do it.
Who could have known that one giant conglomerate owning everything could yield such beautiful results?
It's an absolute disaster on like the capitalism front, but it's so weird as a Marvel fan to be like, you just fixed something that was a problem for 20 years, because it always was weird to us that these characters couldn't talk to each other. So I have to be very worried and very thrilled at the same time. It's a weird time.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for lending us your knowledge and insight and passion and love of all these things. It's one of my favorite things about you. I love it. And yeah, I think like, I know we talked about this because it's timely, but I would love if you just want to come back and talk about more of this MCU stuff.
This was a delight. I will apparently try to make you like all of the movies you didn't like, which truly it is fine if you didn't love them. That's what you're kind of doing.
What's your top five? I don't want to put you on the spot. If you could, to anything that you think might qualify for your top five, non-committal, you will not be held accountable for those decisions, but off your top of your head.
All right, clearly have to answer this in the afterlife, but it feels unfair to like Infinity War and Endgame are, for me, completely unique movie experiences that like there's nothing you could even compare them to. They worked real well, and they paid off 10 years of investment in a particularly special way that like it feels like that doesn't even count. If historical changes and different other feelings notwithstanding, I'll never forget the experience of watching the first Avengers in theaters. That was a big, like, I didn't know that you could, the first real, in a lot of ways, of the, I can't believe you pulled this off and got regular people to care about the Avengers. Like, kids, you don't remember this, but they were not cool. Comic book fans love them, but they weren't even A-list in the comics. It's a long story. Let's see. Captain Marvel. I love her. I know it was a mixed bag for folks. I like it more every time I see it. They had a lot of work to do on that movie, but there's a lot of stuff that I loved very much, and I it's dear to me. Thor Ragnarok is amazing. And I guess Winter Soldier probably, because it's just like movie-wise, incredible.
Oh yeah, it's so good.
But I didn't put Black Panther on the list. I don't know, y'all.
You get to count you count the Infinity War Endgame as one, and then from there you'd have the extra spot for Black Panther.
Yeah, Cap Panther, Winter Soldier, and Ragnarok. Probably, I'll have to answer for this in the afterlife. My top.
Amy, if
No
people,
accountability here.
If people want to hear you talk in depth about this more and watch play games and all of that, where can they do that?
Thank you. I am Amy, like enthusiast, but with my name on the end. Pretty much everywhere on the internet, including on Twitch, where we play new games, old games, very old games. I have a book club. We just finished reading Hitchhiker's Guide because I was like, I need something purely happy.
I saw you doing that, and I was like, yeah.
Which was real fun. And we just started doing a discussion show because I got like to episode 6 or 7 in WandaVision, and I was like, I will explode if I don't do this. So we'll probably roll that into Winter Soldier and keep going and just talk comic book background and genre TV.
Well, thank you so much again for joining. This was a blast. And to everybody watching and listening, thank you. And we'll see you next week in the multiverse with Alfred Molina. I love that Molina.